Number 1. Charles Sobhraj. Charles Sobhraj, born in Saigon, was a French serial killer whose victims were mainly Western tourists traveling through South and Southeast Asia during the 1970s. His first known crimes began when he was a teenager, committing burglaries in France and manipulating guards for favors while imprisoned at Poissy. Upon release, he became involved in high society thefts and frauds. With his French girlfriend Chantal Compagnon, he fled Europe and began traveling across Asia, supporting himself through scams and robberies. By his late 20s, he was operating a criminal network targeting travelers on the hippie trail. In Bombay, he lived under false identities, smuggling cars and jewelry. He later met Marie-André Leclerc from Quebec, who became his loyal partner. Alongside a young Indian accomplice, Ajay Chowdhury, Sobhraj befriended and drugged travelers, often stealing their passports and valuables. Between 1975 and 1976, he was linked to a string of murders in Thailand, Nepal, and India. Among the confirmed victims were American Teresa Knowlton, Canadian Laurent Carrière, American Connie Jo Bronzich, Dutch students Henk Bintanja and Cornelia Hemker, and several others. Many of his victims were found burned or drowned, and he was believed to have murdered at least 20 people in total. Sobhraj's downfall came in July 1976 when he and his group intoxicated a group of French students in New Delhi. The students, realizing what had happened, overpowered him and alerted the police. Sobhraj was arrested and sent to Tihar jail. He manipulated the prison system through bribery and influence, living comfortably while awaiting trial. He was convicted of the murder of Jean-Luc Solomon and sentenced to 12 years in prison. His partner Leclerc was paroled to Canada, where she died of cancer, still claiming loyalty to him. In 1986, nearing the end of his sentence, Sobhraj hosted a party for inmates and guards, drugged them with sleeping pills, and escaped. He was recaptured weeks later at a restaurant in Goa by Inspector Madhukar Zende. The escape extended his sentence by 10 more years, effectively protecting him from extradition to Thailand, where he faced a possible death penalty. In February 1997, after serving 21 years, he was released from Tihar jail and returned to France. In 2003, Sobhraj returned to Nepal, where authorities still sought him for the murders of Connie Jo Bronzich and Laurent Carrière. A journalist spotted him at a Kathmandu casino, leading to his arrest. In 2004, he was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment by the Kathmandu District Court. He continued to deny all charges, claiming he was a victim of mistaken identity. In 2010, the Supreme Court of Nepal upheld his life sentence, also imposing an additional year for illegal entry. Sobhraj served 19 years in Nepal's central jail in Kathmandu. During his imprisonment, he married his interpreter, Nihita Biswas, though officials denied the marriage's legality. He underwent several heart surgeries while incarcerated and continued to attract media attention through interviews and books written about him. On 21 December 2022, citing his old age and health complications, Nepal's Supreme Court ordered his release under a law allowing the discharge of elderly prisoners showing good behavior. He was released 2 days later and deported to France, where he now resides quietly. He was 78 years old at the time of release, having spent a total of 30 years in prison across India and Nepal. Number 2. Carla Liane Homolka. Carla Liane Homolka, born in Mississauga, Ontario, was in her early 20s when she and her husband, Paul Bernardo, committed a series of violent crimes between 1990 and 1992 in Ontario, Canada. Together, they were responsible for the deaths of 3 young females, Tammy Homolka, Leslie Mahaffey, and Kristen French. Carla was 20 years old when she took part in the assault and killing of her own younger sister, 15-year-old Tammy. After a Christmas party in December 1990, Carla and Paul intoxicated Tammy with halothane stolen from Carla's workplace and filmed the assault. Tammy lost consciousness, vomited, and died. Her death was ruled accidental at the time. Months later, in June 1991, the couple abducted 14-year-old Leslie Mahaffey outside her Burlington home. She was held captive, repeatedly assaulted, and videotaped. When she saw Bernardo's face, she was murdered, allegedly by Carla through a substance overdose, though both blamed each other. Her body was later found encased in cement blocks in Lake Gibson. In April 1992, they kidnapped 15-year-old Kristen French from Street Catherine. She was held for 3 days, tortured, assaulted, and choked before her body was left in a ditch. Carla was arrested in January 1993 after police linked Bernardo to multiple assaults in Scarborough and later to the murders. She initially portrayed herself as a battered spouse, claiming she was forced to help. In May 1993, she entered a plea bargain with prosecutors, pleading guilty to 2 counts of manslaughter in exchange for testifying against Bernardo. She received a 12-year prison sentence. The deal was made before the discovery of videotapes showing her active participation in the assaults, which caused public outrage when revealed. The agreement was later criticized as a deal with the devil, but legally upheld. Carla served her sentence at several facilities, including Kingston Prison for Women, Joliet Institution, and Saint Des Plaines. She completed correspondence courses, earning a degree in psychology. She did not apply for early parole and served the full term, with authorities noting her potential risk of reoffending. During her incarceration, she was closely monitored and evaluated by psychiatrists who described her as manipulative with a shallow emotional range. Carla Homolka was released from Saint Des Plaines on July 4, 2005, after 12 years in custody. A Quebec court imposed temporary restrictions on her movements, contact, and activities under Section 810 of the Criminal Code. These restrictions expired later that year. Following her release, she settled in Quebec under the name Leanne Bordelais and married her lawyer's brother. She later moved to Guadeloupe before returning to Quebec, where she raised 3 children. As of November 2025, Carla Homolka, now in her mid-50s, resides quietly in Quebec under her legal name. She has not reoffended and remains under no legal supervision. She served a total of 12 years in prison for her role in the deaths of 3 victims. Despite her release, her crimes continue to attract public and academic scrutiny due to the leniency of her sentence compared to the gravity of her involvement. Number 3. Colin Pitchfork. Colin Pitchfork was an English bakery worker from Leicestershire, whose crimes marked a turning point in forensic history. On the evening of 21 November 1983, 15-year-old Linda Mann took a shortcut home through a dark footpath known locally as the Black Pad in Narborough, Leicestershire. The next morning, her body was discovered. She had been assaulted and choked. Despite intensive investigation, the only forensic clue was a semen sample linking the killer to a man with type A blood and a rare enzyme subtype shared by about 10% of males. With no suspects matching that profile, the case went unsolved. 3 years later, on 31 July 1986, another 15-year-old schoolgirl, Dawn Ashworth, left her Enderby home to visit a friend and never returned. Her body was found 2 days later along 10-Pound Lane. She too had been assaulted and choked, and forensic testing revealed the same genetic markers as in Linda Mann's case. Both girls attended Brockington High School, confirming a disturbing connection. The brutal similarity of the murders led police to suspect a serial offender operating in the Leicestershire area. Born in March 1960, Pitchfork grew up in Newbold, Verdon. He was a scout, described as quiet but moody, and began showing deviant assault behavior in his teens. By age 17, he had been fined for indecent exposure to a schoolgirl and later placed on probation for exposing himself to 2 teenage girls. His behavior escalated to assault in his 20s. Married in 1981 to a social worker, he appeared to live an ordinary life while working as a cake decorator at Hampshire's Bakery in Leicester. Behind this facade, he developed an obsession with attacking women. The investigation into the Leicestershire murders intensified in 1987 when police launched the world's first mass DNA screening, asking every local male aged 16 to 34 to give a blood sample voluntarily. Over 5,000 men participated, but no match was found. Pitchfork, aware his DNA would expose him, convinced a co-worker, Lan Kelly, to take the test on his behalf using a falsified passport. The deception went unnoticed until Kelly later boasted about it in a pub where another colleague overheard and reported it to authorities. On 19 September 1987, detectives arrested Colin Pitchfork at his home in Littlethorpe. During questioning, he confessed to the murders of both girls and to numerous other assaults, claiming he choked his victims to hide his identity. Investigators dismissed his explanation as self-serving. His wife reportedly lashed out at him when he admitted the crimes, unable to believe the double life he had led. In January 1988, at Leicester Crown Court, Pitchfork pleaded guilty to 2 counts of rape and murder, 2 counts of assault, and 1 count of conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. Psychiatric reports described him as a psychopathic personality with deep assault pathology. The trial marked the first time DNA evidence had been used to secure a murder conviction. The presiding judge sentenced him to life imprisonment, with a minimum term of 30 years later reduced to 28. The Lord Chief Justice remarked that he doubted Pitchfork should ever be released. During imprisonment, Pitchfork served time at several facilities, including HMP Gartree, and later an open prison. He completed educational courses and worked transcribing printed music into Braille, developing a reputation for compliance and artistic ability. In April 2016, the parole board reviewed his case, noting his apparent rehabilitation, but refused his release, instead transferring him to a lower security open prison. On 7 June 2021, the parole board approved his release on license. He left prison on 1 September that year after 33 years in custody. However, within 3 months, he breached license conditions by approaching young women during walks and was recalled to prison on 19 November. Public outrage followed, and a review found that the board had underestimated his risk. In June 2023, the board again recommended release, but following intervention by the Lord Chancellor, that decision was overturned. Subsequent hearings in October and December reaffirmed that he remained a danger to the public. In 2024, a new review was scheduled, with portions of the hearing made public due to ongoing public concern. As of November 2025, he remains incarcerated in a secure English prison, having served 38 years in custody. He has not been released again and continues to be considered unsuit. Number 4. Arthur John Shawcross. Arthur John Shawcross was an American serial killer whose crimes spanned 2 decades and 2 distinct periods of violence. Born in Kittery, Maine, he was raised in Watertown, New York, where early signs of aggression and antisocial behavior emerged. As a young man, he dropped out of school and later served in the United States Army. After his discharge, he returned to New York, where a pattern of crime and instability followed him through a series of failed marriages and petty offenses. In his late 20s, Shawcross committed his first known murders in Watertown. In May of 1972, he lured 10-year-old Jack Owen Blake into a wooded area he assaulted and murdered him. Only months later, in September of the same year, he murdered 8-year-old Karen Ann Hill, whose body was found under a bridge. Arrested shortly after, Shawcross confessed, but due to weak physical evidence, prosecutors accepted a plea deal for first-degree manslaughter. He was sentenced to an indeterminate term of up to 25 years and served 14 at Attica and Greenhaven correctional facilities. Despite warnings from prison psychiatrists labeling him a schizoid psychopath, Shawcross was released on parole in April 1987 after being deemed rehabilitated. Following his release, he struggled to reintegrate. Public protests forced him to relocate multiple times before he settled with his girlfriend, Rose Wally, in Rochester, New York. Unknown to authorities, Shawcross soon resumed killing. Between March 1988 and December 1989, Shawcross murdered 11 women, most of them street workers in the Rochester area. Victims included Dorothy Blackburn, Anna Stephan, and June Cicero. The killings followed a consistent pattern of sexual assault, choking, and disposal of bodies near rivers and wooded areas. Police surveillance intensified after the discovery of Cicero's body, leading to Shawcross's arrest on January 5, 1990, when he was found satisfying himself intimately near the crime scene. At trial, he pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. His defense psychiatrist, Dr. Dorothy Lewis, testified that he suffered from brain damage, dissociative identity disorder, and post-traumatic stress linked to his claimed Vietnam service. Prosecution experts, including Dr. Park Dietz, rejected these claims, diagnosing him with antisocial personality disorder. FBI profiler Robert Ressler also testified, dismissing Shawcross's war stories as fabricated. In November 1990, he was convicted of 10 murders and sentenced to 250 years in prison without parole. During imprisonment at Sullivan Correctional Facility, Shawcross granted interviews in which he alternated between remorse and boastfulness. In 2003, he told a British journalist that he had eaten parts of his victims' bodies, though investigators viewed these claims as attention-seeking. He remained largely isolated but maintained correspondence with family. On November 10, 2008, at 63 years old, Shawcross was transported from Sullivan Correctional Facility to Albany Medical Center after complaining of leg pain. He went into cardiac arrest and was pronounced dead that evening. As of November 2025, Arthur Shawcross remains a case frequently cited by criminal psychologists as an example of the consequences of premature parole. He served 14 years before release, then an additional 18 years before death, totaling 32 years in state custody. Number 5. Albert Flick. Albert Flick was a United States Army veteran and longtime resident of Maine, whose life became defined by repeated acts of violence against women across several decades. Born in Bangor, he lived an ordinary early adulthood, working for nearly 20 years at a donut shop in Westbrook. Those who knew him described him as quiet but quick to anger. His first act of fatal violence occurred in late January 1979 in Westbrook, Maine, following the breakdown of his marriage to 35-year-old Sandra Flick. After she filed for divorce and had police remove him from their apartment, she invited him back several weeks later to collect his belongings. Inside the apartment, an argument escalated. Witnessed by Sandra's 12-year-old daughter from another relationship, Flick forced Sandra into a chair, declaring that he loved her and did not want to hurt her. Moments later, he attacked her with a jackknife, stabbing her 14 times. Sandra survived briefly, identifying her husband as the attacker before dying. Flick was arrested the same day and charged with murder. During trial, the court heard testimony about his violent upbringing and unstable temper. In 1979, he was convicted of his wife's murder and sentenced to 30 years in prison. He served 21 years at Maine State Prison before being released in 2000 for good behavior. His release marked the beginning of a troubling cycle of recurring assaults. Between 2000 and 2010, he was arrested several times for attacking women he dated. In 2007, he punched and stabbed a woman with a fork. In 2010, he assaulted another woman using a knife handle and a screwdriver before attempting to hang himself when police arrived. Prosecutors warned the court that he posed a significant danger to women, but in 2010, a judge ruled that his advancing age reduced his threat level, stating that he would age out of violent behavior. Flick returned to prison briefly for violating probation in 2014, but was again released in 2016. He moved to Lewiston, Maine, to live with his nephew. There, in 2018, he met 48-year-old Kimberly Dobbie, a mother of twin boys who frequented the public library. Flick befriended her, offering to buy meals for her children. Witnesses later noted his growing obsession as he followed Dobbie from the library to bus stops and local shops. On July 15, 2018, after purchasing 2 pink-handled paring knives from a nearby store days earlier, he followed Dobbie to Rancourt's laundromat in Lewiston. As Dobbie stepped outside to make a phone call while her children played nearby, Flick approached and stabbed her at least 11 times. The attack occurred in broad daylight. Bystanders Dennis Fisher and Eric Drake intervened, with Fisher subduing Flick until police arrived. Dobbie died at the scene. Flick was arrested immediately and charged with murder. During his trial in Auburn, Maine in July 2019, surveillance footage showed him trailing Dobbie and purchasing the knives. The jury deliberated for less than 1 hour before returning a guilty verdict. At sentencing, the judge described Flick as lacking remorse, noting that he looked directly at Dobbie's children during the stabbing and continued the attack. Friends and relatives of the victim delivered statements expressing relief that he would no longer be free. Flick declined to make a final statement. The court sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. He was transferred to the Maine State Prison, where he remains incarcerated. Flick's case drew national attention as an example of a repeat offender released despite warnings from previous prosecutors. In total, he murdered 2 women across nearly 40 years. As of November 2025, Albert Flick remains at the Maine State Prison, having served over 24 years combined from both convictions. He is not eligible for release again and is expected to spend the remainder of his life in custody. Number 6. Johann Jack Unterweger. Johann Jack Unterweger was an Austrian man who became one of Europe's most controversial serial killers, known for being released from prison after serving 15 years for murder, only to murder again across several countries. He was first convicted in June 1976 for the murder of 18-year-old Margaret Schaefer in Ebersbach, West Germany. Schaefer had been beaten with an iron bar, assaulted, and choked with her own stocking. Unterweger was sentenced to life imprisonment in Garston Prison and later transferred to Stein Prison, where he began writing stories, plays, and an autobiography titled Purgatory, or The Journey into Prison. His writings gained the support of Austrian intellectuals and journalists who believed he had been rehabilitated. While serving his sentence, Unterweger was described as intelligent, articulate, and charming. He corresponded with writers and editors, presenting himself as a man transformed through literature. In 1985, a group of supporters, including notable authors like Elfriede Jelinek and Günter Grass, petitioned for his release, portraying him as an example of successful rehabilitation through art. After serving the minimum 15 years, Unterweger was paroled on May 23, 1990, at the age of 39. Upon release, he became a minor celebrity in Austria, giving interviews, writing for newspapers, and even working with the Austrian public broadcaster ORF to report on crime. Only months after his release, Unterweger resumed his killing. In September 1990, he murdered 30-year-old Blanka Bochkova in Prague, choking her and leaving her body by the Vltava River. Between October 1990 and May 1991, 7 more women were murdered in Austria: Brunhilde Masser, Heidemarie Hammerer, Elfriede Schrempf, Sylvia Zagler, Sabine Moitzi, Regina Prem, and Karin Sladky. All street workers choked with their own undergarments. Each crime scene bore strikingly similar details to his earlier murder. Despite growing suspicion, Unterweger used his public position to deflect doubt, even writing articles criticizing the police for failing to find the killer. In mid-1991, Unterweger traveled to the United States under the pretense of researching American attitudes toward street work for an Austrian magazine. During his stay in Los Angeles, 3 women, Shannon Exley, Irene Rodriguez, and Peggy Booth, were found choked in a nearly identical manner. He had even joined Los Angeles police officers on patrols of red light districts, an act that later stunned investigators. By late 1991, Austrian authorities linked the murders through forensic evidence and issued a warrant for his arrest. When police arrived at his Vienna home, Unterweger had already fled with his teenage girlfriend Bianca Mrak. The two evaded capture across Switzerland, France, and the United States before being arrested by U.S. Marshals in Miami on February 27, 1992. Extradited to Austria on May 27, 1992, Unterweger faced trial for 11 murders committed in Austria, Czechoslovakia, and the United States. During the trial, held in Graz in 1994, prosecutors presented extensive forensic evidence linking fibers from Unterweger's clothing and car to several victims. Psychiatrist Dr. Reinhard Haller testified that Unterweger displayed narcissistic personality disorder and described him as manipulative and incapable of empathy. Throughout the proceedings, Unterweger maintained his innocence, claiming he was framed due to his past. His demeanor in court remained calm and detached, occasionally smiling during witness testimonies. On June 29, 1994, the jury found him guilty of 9 murders by a 6-2 vote. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Hours after the verdict, in his cell at Graz-Karlau prison, Unterweger died by using a rope fashioned from shoelaces and a tracksuit cord tied in the same knot he had used on his victims. He left no final statement. At the time of his death, he was 43 years old and had served approximately 16 years in total, 15 from his first imprisonment and less than 1 from his second. As of November 2025, Johann Jack Unterweger remains recorded as deceased. Number 7. Louis Van Schoor. Sybrand Jacobus Van Schoor, known as Louis Van Schoor, was born in South Africa and served as both a police officer and a private security guard during the apartheid era. In the late 1980s, when racial segregation laws granted broad authority to white security personnel, Van Schoor began operating in East London, a coastal city in South Africa. Between 1986 and 1989, he shot and murdered numerous black South Africans, many of whom were suspected of burglary or petty theft. Official records confirmed 7 murders and 2 attempted murders, but investigators and journalists later alleged that his total victims reached as many as 39. Most of his victims were young black men, with the youngest being only 12 years old. Van Schoor's killings occurred mostly at night. He patrolled industrial and residential areas with his licensed firearm, claiming he was enforcing property security. According to court records, he would often shoot unarmed individuals at close range, later filing reports that described the incidents as justifiable homicides. Police at the time accepted many of these explanations, citing self-defense laws that favored armed white individuals protecting property. Survivors later testified that Van Schoor shot them even after they had surrendered. One survivor recalled being propped up against a table and shot again after falling to the ground. His actions remained largely unchallenged until the end of apartheid approaches in the early 1990s. In 1991, after mounting public pressure and the discovery of inconsistencies in his reports, Van Shore was arrested and charged with multiple counts of murder and attempted murder. The prosecution presented ballistic evidence linking him to numerous crime scenes across East London. During the trial, Van Shore maintained that all those he murdered were criminals caught in the act, describing his actions as lawful enforcement rather than murder. The court, however, rejected his justification in 7 cases, finding him guilty of 7 counts of murder and 2 of attempted murder. In 1992, he was sentenced to 20 years imprisonment at Fort Glamorgan Prison in East London. Despite the gravity of his crimes, his conviction covered only a fraction of the deaths attributed to him, as 32 other killings remained classified by police as justifiable. During imprisonment, Van Shore continued to deny guilt, asserting in several interviews that he acted under encouragement from local police officers and that his actions were intended to reduce crime. He served approximately 12 years in prison before being granted parole in 2004. Upon release, he returned to East London, living a quiet life under supervision. Van Shore's family later drew public attention again when his daughter, Sabrina Van Shore, was convicted in 2002 for hiring a hitman to murder her mother. She received a 25-year sentence and was incarcerated at the same facility where her father had served time. Louis Van Shore gave several interviews after his release, including a 2024 BBC documentary in which he stated that he felt no remorse and no guilt for his past actions, although he denied being a serial killer. In his later years, Van Shore suffered from poor health. By 2021, both of his legs had been partially amputated due to circulation problems. He was hospitalized again in mid-2024 with a severe leg infection which developed into sepsis. On July 25, 2024, Louis Van Shore died in East London at the age of 72. In total, he was confirmed to have murdered 9 people and was suspected of killing up to 39. He served 12 years of his 20-year sentence at Fort Glamorgan Prison before being released on parole. Number 8. Edmund Emil Kemper. Edmund Emil Kemper was born in Burbank, California, and grew up in a troubled household marked by his mother's emotional abuse and a strained family environment. By the time he was 15 years old, he committed his first murders, shooting and killing his grandparents on their rural California ranch. Afterward, he called the police and confessed. Psychiatrists diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia, and he was sent to Atascadero State Hospital for treatment. While confined, Kemper showed intelligence and cooperated with staff, learning to administer psychological tests to other inmates. His IQ was measured at 145, and after several years, doctors concluded he had recovered. In December 1969, on his 21st birthday, Kemper was released on parole and placed in the custody of his mother in Aptos, California. Despite psychiatrist warnings that he should not return to her care, the arrangement was approved. He attempted to live a stable life, attended community college, and worked for the California Division of Highways. Yet, his relationship with his mother remained hostile, and his violent fantasies intensified. Between May 1972 and April 1973, Kemper murdered 6 female hitchhikers in the Santa Cruz area: Marianne Peche, Anita Luchessa, Aiko Koo, Cynthia Schall, Rosalind Thorpe, and Alice Liu. He lured them into his car, drove them to isolated locations, and murdered them through strangulation, stabbing, or shooting. He took their bodies to his home, where he decapitated them, committing acts of necrophilia. He later confessed that his rage was directed at his mother and his victims were surrogates for her. In April 1973, Kemper turned his anger toward his mother, Clarnell Strandberg. Late one night, he murdered her with a hammer while she slept, decapitated her, and mutilated the remains. He then invited her close friend, Sally Hallett, to the house and strangled her. After leaving a confession note, Kemper fled to Colorado. From a phone booth in Pueblo, he called police and confessed to the killings. When officers initially doubted him, he called again and spoke to a detective he knew personally, then waited calmly for his arrest. Kemper was charged with 8 counts of first-degree murder. During his trial in October 1973, his defense argued insanity, but psychiatrists found him legally sane. He testified that 2 beings existed within him, the killer and the observer, but the jury rejected this claim. On November 8, 1973, Kemper was found guilty and sentenced to 8 concurrent life sentences instead of the death penalty, as capital punishment was suspended in California. He was imprisoned at the California Medical Facility in Vacaville, where he became known as a model inmate. He organized inmate therapy schedules and narrated hundreds of audiobooks for the blind. Kemper showed cooperation with authorities and participated in interviews that later assisted the FBI's Behavioral Science Unit in studying serial offenders. As of November 2025, Edmund Kemper has served more than 51 years in prison. Now, in his late 70s, he remains incarcerated at the California Medical Facility in Vacaville. He has never been released and has stated he prefers to stay imprisoned, believing he cannot safely function in society again. He murdered a total of 10 people, 6 college students, his mother, her friend, and his grandparents, and remains under life imprisonment without parole. Number 9. William Lewis Reese. William Lewis Reese, born in early July 1959 in Oklahoma, grew up in a large family on a rural farm near Yukon. His childhood was marked by instability, poverty, and time in foster care. After leaving school in the 9th grade to work as a horseshoer, he married a young woman named Judy Flaming when she became pregnant. Their marriage, followed by a remarriage after a brief divorce, was turbulent and violent. Flaming later recounted that Reese had beaten and threatened her repeatedly. After their second divorce, Reese drifted between jobs, eventually working as a truck driver. In April 1986, while living in Oklahoma, Reese abducted the teenage daughter of a sheriff's deputy after pretending to offer help with her stalled vehicle. He tied her up and assaulted her before she managed to escape. Reese was arrested and charged with kidnapping and assault. While awaiting trial, he assaulted another woman, leading to 2 convictions and a 25-year sentence. However, procedural issues during his trial led to his sentence being reduced, and he was paroled after serving about 10 years in prison. Released in October 1996, Reese returned to his mother's home in Anadarko, Oklahoma, before relocating to Houston, Texas. Within months, a series of disappearances began. On April 3, 1997, 12-year-old Laura Smither vanished while jogging in Friendswood. Her remains were later discovered in a pond. Reese confessed years later to striking and strangling her. In July, he claimed another victim, 20-year-old Kelly Cox, a student from the University of North Texas, whom he strangled and buried in Brazoria County. Later that same month, 19-year-old Tiffany Johnston disappeared from a car wash in Bethany, Oklahoma. Her body was found beaten and choked by the roadside. Reese later admitted to her killing as well. In August, 17-year-old Jessica Kane disappeared after leaving a restaurant in Clear Lake City, Texas. Reese later led investigators to her remains, buried near where he had worked. In May 1997, Reese abducted 19-year-old Sandra Sapaw from a gas station in Webster, Texas. She escaped by jumping from his moving truck, sustaining severe injuries but surviving. Her detailed description led police to Reese, who was arrested and convicted of kidnapping in 1998 and sentenced to 60 years. While serving time in the Ellis unit, his DNA was entered into national databases. In 2015, his DNA linked him to the 1997 murder of Tiffany Johnston. Reese eventually confessed to 4 murders: Laura Smither, Kelly Cox, Tiffany Johnston, and Jessica Kane, while cooperating with Texas Ranger James Holland. His cooperation led to the discovery of 2 victims' remains in 2016. He was extradited to Oklahoma to face trial for Johnston's murder in 2017. After multiple delays, including the pandemic, his trial concluded in May 2021, where he was found guilty and sentenced to death that August. He was later returned to Texas, where in 2022 he pleaded guilty to the other 3 murders and received 3 life sentences. Throughout his trials, Reese displayed little remorse. He claimed that some deaths were accidental and denied sexual motives. His defense team argued that his confessions were coerced in exchange for leniency. Appeals followed, including one in 2025, which was denied by the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals. As of November 2025, William Reese remains incarcerated at the Polunsky Unit in Livingston, Texas. He has served roughly 27 years in total. Number 10. David Port. On the morning of June 7, 1984, in Houston, Texas, a 23-year-old postal carrier named Deborah Sue Schatz was making her mail deliveries on an unfamiliar route in the quiet Memorial neighborhood. She was covering for a colleague who had called in sick. That day would be her last. Her disappearance began one of the most publicized murder cases in Houston's history, centering on 17-year-old David Port, who lived nearby with his father and stepmother. David Port had grown up in an affluent family in Houston's West Side. As a teenager, he was known for being quiet and reserved, but also troubled. Those who knew him described him as intelligent but emotionally detached, often isolated, and fascinated by weapons. On that June morning, he encountered Deborah Schatz as she was delivering mail in his neighborhood. Investigators later determined that Port confronted her outside his home, brandished a pistol, and ordered her inside. When Schatz resisted and attempted to escape, Port shot her 3 times in the head, killing her instantly. When her mail truck was found abandoned on the same block as Port's home, police began searching the area. Bloodhounds followed a scent trail directly to his residence. At first, Port's parents allowed officers to enter, but soon changed their minds and forced them to leave. When police returned with a search warrant, they discovered bloodstains, bullet holes, and a freshly fired gun. While the search continued, Port unexpectedly drove up the street. Officers immediately recognized him, sparking a short, high-speed chase through the residential neighborhood before his capture. During questioning, Port admitted to confronting Schatz, but claimed the shooting had been unintentional. His confession led officers to the wooded area near Buffalo Bayou, where a wrecker driver who had unknowingly helped pull Port's car from the mud earlier guided police to the victim's body. The evidence showed that Schatz had been shot execution style and that her uniform was partially unbuttoned, suggesting a possible attempted assault. The case gained national attention not only for its brutality, but also because Port's parents refused to testify before the grand jury, citing their religious beliefs against testifying against their son. They were briefly jailed for contempt of court. Meanwhile, Port remained free on bond until his trial began in 1985. The jury found him guilty of murder, and he was sentenced to 75 years in prison. Port was incarcerated at the Huntsville unit in Texas. Under the sentencing laws at that time, inmates could receive significant credit for good behavior and overcrowding relief. As a result, Port was eligible for release after serving 1/3 of his sentence. He served approximately 30 years behind bars. Throughout his imprisonment, He never publicly expressed remorse, and according to the Schatz family, he never apologized for the killing. Each time Poort became eligible for parole, the victim's family submitted petitions opposing his release, arguing that he remained dangerous and unrepentant. Nevertheless, in June 2014, just one day shy of the 30th anniversary of the murder, Poort was released from the Huntsville unit at 6 o'clock in the evening. He was transferred to a halfway house in Austin under mandatory supervision. Conditions of his release required that he wear an ankle monitor, remain under strict oversight, avoid contact with the Schatz family, and not enter Harris County without prior approval. At the time of his release, Poort was 47 years old. The family of Deborah Schatz publicly condemned the decision, calling the release of a convicted murderer under outdated sentencing guidelines absurd. Victim rights advocate Andy Kahan noted that the mandatory release policy created during a period of prison overcrowding allowed violent offenders like Poort to re-enter society despite parole board objections. David Poort has remained under supervision since his release. He has not been charged with any new crimes. As of November 2025, he continues to live under restricted conditions in Austin, Texas, after serving approximately 30 years of his 75-year sentence for the murder of one victim, Deborah Sue Schatz. Number 11. Wolfgang Abel and Marco Furlan. Wolfgang Abel, born on the 25th of March, 1959, and Marco Furlan, born on the 16th of January, 1960, were responsible for one of the most disturbing serial murder cases in modern Italian history. Between 1977 and 1984, the two men acting under the name Ludwig committed a series of arson attacks, stabbings, and hammer killings across northern Italy and West Germany, leaving at least 28 dead and 39 injured. Both men came from privileged backgrounds in Verona. Abel, a German-Italian mathematician, worked in an insurance firm with his father. Furlan, the son of a hospital burns unit director, was studying physics at the University of Padua. The pair met as teenagers in high school and bonded over extremist ideologies, believing they were purging society of what they called impurities. They targeted hard substance users, street workers, priests, and homosexuals, leaving leaflets signed Ludwig, featuring Nazi symbols and proclamations like, "We are the last of the Nazis." Their first known murder occurred on the 25th of August 1977 in Verona, when they burned a Roma man, Garino Spinelli, alive in his car using Molotov cocktails. Over the following years, they killed waiter Luciano Stefanato, drug addict Claudio Costa, and prostitute Alice Maria Beretta, often using knives or axes. In May 1981, they set fire to a shelter in Verona, killing a 17-year-old boy named Luca Martinotti. In July 1982, they murdered two priests, Father Gabriele Pigatto and Father Giuseppe Lovato, in Vicenza. And in February 1983, they killed another priest, Don Armando Bison, in Trento, inserting a crucifix into his skull. Their most devastating attack occurred on the 14th of May, 1983, when they set fire to the Eros Cinema in Milan, killing 6 and injuring 32. In January 1984, they struck in Munich, setting the Liverpool disco ablaze, killing waitress Corinne Tartarotti. Their final attempt came on the 4th of March 1984 at the Melamara Disco in Castiglione delle Stiviere. They entered with gasoline canisters, intending to burn the club with hundreds inside. However, the club's fireproof carpets slowed the flames, and security staff subdued them before they could escape. They were beaten by the crowd and rescued by police. Both men were charged with multiple counts of murder, arson, and terrorism. Psychiatric evaluations suggested Abel had diminished capacity, though the court later rejected this defense. On the 10th of February 1987, both were sentenced to 30 years in prison. The prosecution had sought life imprisonment. In 1991, before his final appeal, Furlan escaped from a semi-open facility in Casale di Scodosia, but was recaptured in May 1995 in Crete, living under a false identity. He attempted to hurt himself shortly after being returned to Italy. In 1999, both sentences were reduced to 27 years. Abel served his sentence largely in Verona's Montorio prison. In 2009, his detention was converted to house arrest at his family home in Valpolicella. He was later released fully in November 2016 after completing probation. Furlan earned degrees in physics and computer engineering while incarcerated and was released on probation in November 2010 after over 25 years in custody. After their release, both men stated they had no further contact. Abel later expressed interest in giving testimony about the crimes, but never did. On the 25th of October 2024, Wolfgang Abel died at age 65 in Negrar de Valpolicella following long-term complications from a fall. As of November 2025, Marco Furlan remains a free man in Italy, having served approximately 27 years. Number 12. Leslie Louise Van Houten. Leslie Louise Van Houten was 20 years old when she took part in the murders of Leno and Rosemary LaBianca on the night of August 9, 1969, at their home in Los Feliz, Los Angeles, California. Born in the Los Angeles suburb of Altadena, she grew up in a middle-class family with strict moral values, but her teenage years were marked by rebellion and drug use. After joining Charles Manson's commune through friends in the summer of 1968, she became one of the devoted members of what was later known as the Manson family. On the night of the murders, Charles Manson and several followers entered the LaBianca home. Manson tied up the couple and left the house, instructing Tex Watson, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Leslie Van Houten to kill them. Watson stabbed Leno LaBianca multiple times before turning to Rosemary, who was held down by Krenwinkel and Van Houten. After Watson handed her a knife, Van Houten attacked Rosemary at least 14 times. The crime scene was brutal, and words were written on the walls in the victim's blood. Both victims were pronounced dead at the scene the following morning. Van Houten was arrested later that year, along with Manson and other members of the group. During her trial in 1971, she often appeared detached and under Manson's influence, laughing during testimony and mimicking Manson's symbolic X carved into his forehead. She was convicted of 2 counts of murder and 1 of conspiracy to commit murder and sentenced to death. When the California Supreme Court abolished the death penalty in 1972, her sentence was reduced to life imprisonment. Her conviction was later overturned due to errors during her first trial, and 2 retrials followed. The second trial in 1977 ended in a hung jury. At her third trial in 1978, she was again convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 7 years to life in prison. Van Houten served her sentence at the California Institution for Women, where she participated in rehabilitation programs, pursued education, and worked in the prison newspaper. Over the decades, she expressed remorse for her actions, consistently stating that she had been under Manson's control at the time and that she took full responsibility for her role in the murders. Despite this, her parole applications were denied more than 20 times. Governors Jerry Brown and Gavin Newsom repeatedly vetoed her parole approvals, arguing she still posed a threat to public safety. After 52 years in prison, the California Court of Appeals overturned Governor Newsom's latest denial in May 2023, ruling that she had demonstrated rehabilitation and posed no current danger to society. On July 11, 2023, Leslie Van Houten was released from the California Institution for Women at the age of 73. She was transferred to a supervised transitional living facility, marking the end of more than 5 decades in custody. As of November 2025, Leslie Van Houten remains on supervised parole in California. She has not reoffended and maintains a private life away from media attention. She served approximately 52 years in prison for the murders of 2 people. Number 13. Henry Lee Lucas. Henry Lee Lucas was born in a rural part of Virginia and grew up in a household marked by extreme poverty and abuse. From a young age, he endured continuous physical and emotional torment from his mother, Nellie Viola Lucas, who forced him to dress as a girl, publicly humiliated him, and often beat him. His father, an alcoholic who lost both legs in a railroad accident, died of exposure after being left outside one winter night. Lucas left school by the 6th grade and ran away from home as an adolescent. During his teenage years, he began committing petty theft and cruelty to animals, behaviors that escalated into violent impulses. At around 14 years old, Lucas claimed his first murder, the strangulation of a 17-year-old girl named Laura Everline Burnsley, although this confession was later retracted. In his early 20s, after drifting between states, Lucas reunited with his estranged mother in Michigan. Their relationship remained hostile. On the night of January 11, 1960, in Tecumseh, Michigan, an argument escalated when his mother struck him with a broom. Drunk and enraged, Lucas attacked her in the neck. When police arrived, she was still alive but died soon after from her injuries. Lucas was arrested in Ohio and returned to Michigan to face trial. He was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to up to 40 years in Jackson State Penitentiary. While imprisoned, Lucas repeatedly attempted suicide and was transferred to the Ionia State Hospital, where he underwent electric shock therapy. After serving 10 years, he was released in June 1970 due to prison overcrowding. Following his release, he continued a transient life, working odd jobs and forming short-lived relationships. In 1971, he was sentenced again to a few years for the attempted abduction of a 15-year-old girl. Upon his release in 1975, he moved through several states before settling in Florida, where he met Otis Elwood Toole, a drifter with similar violent tendencies. Lucas and Toole formed a close relationship and began traveling together across the southern and midwestern United States. They later claimed responsibility for numerous murders committed during these travels, targeting hitchhikers, women, and drifters. In 1982, Lucas met 15-year-old Frida Becky Powell, Toole's niece, and began traveling with her. That August, after she expressed a desire to return home, Lucas murdered her near Denton, Texas, dismembered her body, and later murdered 82-year-old Katie Rich in Ringgold, Texas. Lucas was arrested in June 1983 for unlawful firearm possession. During questioning, he confessed to both murders and later to hundreds of others across the country. Authorities formed a special task force to investigate his claims, eventually clearing more than 200 unsolved cases based on his confessions. However, journalists later exposed inconsistencies showing Lucas could not have been physically present for most of the murders. Many of his confessions were determined to be false or coerced, as he had been given access to case files and rewarded with privileges for cooperation. Ultimately, Lucas was convicted of 11 murders, including his mother Becky Powell and Katie Rich. He received a death sentence for one victim known as Orange Socks, a woman found choked in Williamson County, Texas. Years later, evidence revealed Lucas had been in Florida at the time of that murder. In 1998, Governor George W. Bush commuted his death sentence to life imprisonment, citing doubts about his guilt in that particular case. Throughout his imprisonment, Lucas maintained alternating confessions and denials. He spent the remainder of his life at the Ellis Unit in Huntsville, Texas. On March 12, 2001, he died in his cell at the age of 64 from heart failure. As of November 2025, Henry Lee Lucas remains one of the most controversial figures in American criminal history. Though officially linked to 11 confirmed murders, He falsely confessed to hundreds more. He served approximately 31 years in total across his 2 imprisonments at Jackson State Penitentiary and Ellis Unit, dying while serving a life sentence. Number 14. Catherine May Wood. Catherine May Wood was born in early March 1962 and raised in Michigan. As a young woman, she worked in nursing homes and hospitals, showing an early interest in caregiving. By her mid-20s, she was employed as a nurse's aide at Alpine Manor, a nursing facility in Walker, a quiet suburb of Grand Rapids, Michigan. It was there, in 1986, that she met Gwendolyn Gale Graham, a new employee who had recently moved from Texas. The two became close friends, and their relationship developed into a romantic partnership. In January 1987, according to Wood's later testimony, Graham smothered an elderly female patient suffering from Alzheimer's disease while Wood stood as a lookout. The death appeared natural, and no autopsy was performed. Over the following months, 4 more elderly women died under similar circumstances. Mae Mason, aged 79, Edith Cook, aged 98, Marguerite Chambers, aged 60, Myrtle Luce, aged 95, and Belle Burkhardt, aged 74. All were patients at Alpine Manor. Wood later told investigators that the murders were a form of emotional bonding between her and Graham, describing it as a love game. She claimed the pair initially attempted to select victims whose initials would spell the word murder, but later began counting each killing as a day, in reference to their private phrase, "I will love you forever and a day." The crimes went unnoticed until 1988, when Wood's ex-husband approached police and reported what she had confided to him. Investigators questioned Wood over several interviews. She described the killings in detail and portrayed herself as a passive accomplice manipulated by Graham. Based largely on her statements, 2 bodies were exhumed and re-examined, and though the autopsies revealed no conclusive physical evidence of smothering, the medical examiner ruled the deaths as homicides due to the consistency of Wood's testimony. Both women were arrested in early December 1988, Graham in Texas and Wood in Michigan. During the subsequent trial, Wood accepted a plea agreement, testifying against Graham in exchange for a reduced charge. She claimed Graham planned and carried out all 5 killings, while she only acted as a lookout or distracted supervisors. Graham denied the accusations and argued that Wood had fabricated the story as revenge after their breakup. Despite the lack of physical evidence, Graham was convicted on November 3, 1989, of 5 counts of murder and 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder, and was sentenced to 5 life terms. Catherine Wood pleaded guilty to 1 count of second-degree murder and 1 count of conspiracy to commit second-degree murder. In 1992, she was sentenced to 2 concurrent 20-year prison terms. She served her sentence at the Federal Correctional Institution in Tallahassee, Florida, where she reportedly maintained good behavior and participated in various prison programs. Over time, controversy grew around her testimony. Journalist Lowell Cauffiel, in his book Forever and 5 Days, presented evidence that Wood had manipulated investigators, describing her as a cunning storyteller who may have been the true instigator of the crimes. Psychological reports later suggested Graham was emotionally unstable and easily influenced, raising doubts about Wood's version of events. Catherine Wood became eligible for parole in early 2005 after serving nearly 17 years. Following multiple denials and appeals, she was released on January 16, 2020, after serving roughly 32 years in total. Upon release, she moved to South Carolina to live with relatives under parole supervision. As of November 2025, Catherine May Wood remains a free woman in her early 60s, having served over 3 decades in federal custody. She has not been charged with any new crimes since her release. The total confirmed number of victims attributed to her involvement remains 5. Number 15. Mitchell Scott Johnson and Andrew Douglas Golden. On March 24, 1998, Mitchell Scott Johnson, aged 13, and Andrew Douglas Golden, aged 11, carried out a mass shooting at Westside Middle School in Craighead County near Jonesboro, Arkansas. The attack took place shortly after midday, during the fifth period class, when Golden activated a fire alarm, prompting students and teachers to evacuate the building. Johnson waited in nearby woods, armed with a collection of rifles and pistols stolen from Golden's grandfather. As the students and staff exited the school, both boys opened fire, killing 5 people and wounding 10 others. The victims included teacher Shannon Wright, who shielded a student, and 4 students, Stephanie Johnson, Natalie Brooks, Paige Herring, and Brittany Varner. In the hours before the shooting, both perpetrators had packed Golden's mother's van with camping gear, food, and over 2,000 rounds of ammunition, suggesting plans to escape after the attack. After firing 22 shots, they attempted to flee but were apprehended by police 10 minutes later near the school grounds. Their motives were traced to a combination of personal anger and fascination with violence. Witnesses recalled that Johnson had threatened a classmate and told friends he had a lot of killing to do, while Golden had previously told peers about violent dreams involving the school. Due to their ages, the boys were charged as juveniles under Arkansas law. During their trial, Johnson read a letter expressing remorse, stating that he had not meant to target anyone specifically. Both were convicted on 5 counts of murder and 10 counts of assault. On August 11, 1998, they were sentenced to remain in custody until their 21st birthdays, the maximum penalty allowable for offenders under 14. They were transported to the Arkansas Juvenile Assessment and Treatment Center, the state's highest security youth facility. The prosecutor publicly stated that, were it legally possible, he would have sought the death penalty. Johnson was released on his 21st birthday, August 11, 2005, after serving 7 years. Golden was released on May 25, 2007, his 21st birthday, after 9 years. Both had been held at the Federal Correctional Institution in Memphis following additional federal weapons charges. The leniency of their sentences prompted widespread criticism and led to reforms in Arkansas's juvenile sentencing laws. Following the release, Johnson struggled with recurring criminal behavior. In 2007, he was arrested in Fayetteville, Arkansas, for possession of a loaded weapon and marijuana. The following year, he was convicted of federal weapons charges and later sentenced to a total of 18 years in state prison for theft and drug-related crimes. His judge remarked that he had failed to reform despite having another chance at life. Johnson was eventually released in July 2015 and placed under supervision in Texas, where he entered a rehabilitation program. Golden, who later changed his name to Drew Douglas Grant, lived a quieter post-release life. In 2008, he attempted to obtain a concealed firearm permit, which was denied after police matched his fingerprints to his past record. He later settled in Missouri with his wife and daughter. On July 27, 2019, he was murdered in a head-on car crash near Cave City, Arkansas, at the age of 33. Both perpetrators were responsible for the deaths of 5 individuals. As of November 2025, Mitchell Johnson remains alive and living under restricted supervision after serving over 22 years in total across juvenile and adult prisons. Number 16. Carol Ann Fugate. On January 21, 1958, in Lincoln, Nebraska, 14-year-old Carol Ann Fugate became involved in a series of murders that shocked the nation. Living with her mother Velda Bartlett, her stepfather Marion Bartlett, and her half-sister Betty Jean, Carol was a junior high school student known to be intelligent and sociable. She had been dating 19-year-old Charles Starkweather, a troubled high school dropout who had already begun showing violent tendencies. Their relationship would soon evolve into one of the most infamous murder sprees in American history. That morning, Charles Starkweather arrived at the Bartlett home armed with a shotgun. When an argument broke out, he shot Marion and Velda and bludgeoned 2-year-old Betty Jean to death. Fugate later claimed she returned home to find the killings had already occurred and that Starkweather threatened her, saying her family would remain safe if she did as he said. Over the next 6 days, the pair stayed in the home, turning away visitors while the decomposing bodies lay hidden nearby. Concerned relatives eventually grew suspicious, prompting Starkweather and Fugate to flee across Nebraska. As they traveled west, Starkweather murdered 7 additional victims, including Robert Jensen and Carole King, a young high school couple. Fugate admitted to holding a shotgun during that incident, but insisted she was acting under duress. Their crime spree extended into Wyoming, where they murdered a traveling salesman and a couple before being captured near Douglas, Wyoming, on January 29, 1958. Starkweather surrendered after a brief chase, while Fugate ran toward police, shouting for protection. During the trial, Starkweather claimed that Fugate was a willing accomplice and had murdered several victims herself. Fugate maintained that she was held hostage and acted out of fear. The court, however, found inconsistencies in her testimony, noting multiple opportunities when she could have fled. In November 1958, a jury convicted her of first-degree murder in the death of Robert Jensen. She was sentenced to life imprisonment at the Nebraska Correctional Center for Women in York, Nebraska, becoming the youngest woman in United States history to be convicted of first-degree murder. Starkweather was sentenced to death and executed in June 1959. In 1973, after years of good conduct, the Nebraska Board of Pardons commuted Fugate's sentence to 30 to 50 years, with Governor J. James Exon voting in favor. She became eligible for parole and was released on June 20, 1976, after serving 18 years. Fugate settled in Michigan, where she worked as a janitorial assistant and nanny, living quietly under her own name. In 2007, she married machinist Frederick Clare, taking the name Carol Ann Clare. The couple resided in Hillsdale, Michigan until August 5, 2013, when they were involved in a car accident that killed her husband and left her seriously injured. In February 2020, Carol Ann Clare sought a formal pardon from the Nebraska Board of Pardons, arguing that she had been an unwilling participant and remained burdened by her past. Despite some victim relatives supporting her plea, the board denied the request. She continues to insist she was a frightened teenager manipulated by Starkweather. As of November 2025, Carol Ann Clare, now 82 years old, lives quietly in Michigan. She served 18 years in prison at the Nebraska Correctional Center for Women and has never reoffended. Her case remains one of the most debated in American criminal history, blurring the line between accomplice and victim. Number 17. Kenneth Allen McDuff. Kenneth Allen McDuff was executed on November 17, 1998, at the Huntsville unit in Texas for a series of murders that began in the 1960s and resumed after his release from prison in the late 1980s. Born in Rosebud, Texas, McDuff was the 5th of 6 children in a family supported by his father's concrete business. From adolescence, he developed a reputation for bullying and violent behavior, quitting school to work in his father's company. At 18 years old, he was convicted of multiple burglaries in Bell, Milam, and Falls counties, and sentenced to 12 concurrent 4-year terms, but was paroled after 1 year. On August 6, 1966, in Everman, Texas, McDuff, then 20, and an accomplice, Roy Dale Green, kidnapped 3 teenagers: Robert Brand, aged 17, his girlfriend Edna Louise Sullivan, aged 16, and Brand's cousin Mark Dunham, aged 15, At gunpoint, McDuff forced them into the trunk of their car, later shooting Brand and Dunham to death. Sullivan was assaulted by both men before McDuff choked her with a broomstick handle. The pair buried the murder weapon and washed their car to destroy evidence. Within days, Green confessed, and McDuff was arrested by Falls County Sheriff Albert Pamplin. In December 1966, he was convicted of 3 counts of murder and sentenced to death by electric chair, while Green received 25 years. In 1972, following the U.S. Supreme Court's decision in Furman v. Georgia, McDuff's death sentence was commuted to life imprisonment. He spent over 16 years in Texas prisons, where he became known for manipulation and threats against other inmates. Despite several warnings from prison staff, McDuff convinced the parole board of his supposed rehabilitation and was released in 1989 after serving approximately 23 years. Soon after his release, a series of new murders began. Between 1989 and 1992, McDuff kidnapped, assaulted, and killed at least 6 women across Texas. Among his victims were Seraphia Parker, Brenda Thompson, Regina Deanne Moore, Cynthia Gonzalez, Colleen Reed, Valencia Joshua, and Melissa Northrup. Witnesses saw him abduct Reed from an Austin car wash in December 1991 with the help of an accomplice, Alva Hank Worley, who later confessed his involvement. Northrup, a pregnant store clerk, was last seen alive in Waco in March 1992. Her body was found weeks later in a Dallas County gravel pit. After Worley's confession, federal authorities issued a warrant for McDuff's arrest. He fled Texas, assuming the alias Richard Fowler and working as a trash collector in Kansas City, Missouri. On May 4, 1992, U.S. Marshals Thomas and Mike McNamara, sons of one of the officers who had first arrested McDuff in 1966, apprehended him after a co-worker recognized him from America's Most Wanted. McDuff was extradited to Texas and charged with capital murder in the death of Melissa Northrup. His trial began in Waco in June 1992, where the prosecution presented forensic evidence and witness testimony linking him to multiple killings. The jury found him guilty and sentenced him to death on February 18, 1993. While awaiting execution at the Ellis unit, McDuff filed numerous appeals claiming innocence and alleging wrongful conviction. All appeals were denied. In his final weeks, he confessed to murdering Colleen Reed and provided details leading investigators to her burial site. On the evening of November 17, 1998, Kenneth McDuff was executed by lethal injection at the Huntsville unit. When asked for a final statement, he declined to speak. He was 52 years old and had spent roughly 24 years in prison across 2 sentences. McDuff was buried at the Captain Joe Bird Cemetery in Huntsville under his inmate number 999055. As of November 2025, Kenneth Allen McDuff remains one of the most notorious examples of a violent offender released from prison who resumed killing, responsible for at least 9 confirmed murders committed across 2 decades in Texas. Number 18. Timothy Chavira. In September 1986, 23-year-old Timothy Chavira of Burbank, California, committed the brutal murder of his 48-year-old stepmother, Lori Ann Chavira. She was found dead inside the trunk of her car near Los Angeles. Investigators discovered that she had been beaten and attacked to death, and prosecutors at the time described the killing as one driven by hatred rather than any clear motive. The crime shocked the local community and tore apart the Chavira family. Following his arrest, Timothy Chavira faced trial for first-degree murder. In 1987, a Los Angeles County jury found him guilty, and he was sentenced to 26 years to life in state prison. During the trial, he remained largely expressionless, offering little explanation for his actions. He began serving his sentence at a California state prison facility, spending nearly 3 decades behind bars. While incarcerated, Chavira showed no public record of rehabilitation efforts or remorse. After serving almost 30 years, Timothy Chavira was granted parole and released in July 2017. At that time, he was in his mid-50s. For a brief period, he lived quietly in California, subject to the conditions of his parole. However, 2 years later, his name would resurface in connection with another killing. On December 7, 2019, 76-year-old Dr. Editha Cruz de Leon, a retired obstetrician originally from the Philippines, was found dead in her northeast Los Angeles home. The medical examiner determined that she had died from sharp force injuries and strangulation. Investigators later linked the crime to Timothy Chavira. He was arrested on December 18, 2019, and charged with murder. Authorities stated that while Chavira and Dr. De Leon may have had prior contact, they did not have any known personal relationship. In court, Chavira pleaded guilty to 1 count of murder with a special circumstance allegation that he had a prior conviction for first-degree murder. On January 13, 2020, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During sentencing, he made no statement to the court and displayed minimal emotion. Prosecutors noted that his prior release had ended tragically, as he had taken another innocent life within 2 years of gaining freedom. Dr. De Leon's family described her as a loving mother of 5 sons and grandmother of 5, a woman who enjoyed gardening, cooking, and traveling. Her death deeply affected the community she had served for decades. As of November 2025, Timothy Chavira remains incarcerated at a California state prison under a life sentence without parole. He has served over 35 years combined across both prison terms. There are no known reports of future appeals or parole considerations. His case remains a stark example of a convicted murderer released after decades in custody who went on to murder again. Number 19. Alexander Andreyevich Wrubel. Alexander Andreyevich Wrubel was born in Ukraine on the 25th of December, 1980, and later lived with his family in Tallinn, Estonia. By his teenage years, he had developed a severe addiction to inhaling gasoline vapors, which caused frequent hallucinations and violent impulses. Described by neighbors as quiet but unpredictable, Wrubel was 16 years old when he began a series of murders that would shock the city. The first killing took place on the 19th of September, 1997, when Wrubel, under the influence of gasoline fumes, entered the home of his neighbor, Tonu Pold, a middle-aged disabled man. Acting on a sudden impulse to kill, Wrubel attacked Pold repeatedly with a knife, later telling investigators that he chose him because he thought he would not resist. Less than 2 months later, on the 7th of November, Wrubel's second murder occurred inside his own home. His father, Andrei Wrubel, attacked a guest named Alexei Pavlov, stabbing him 4 times in a jealous rage over a suspected affair. Alexander then dragged the injured man into another room, choked him and threw his body out of a 3rd-floor window. Both father and son were later charged for this killing, and Andrei received 7 years in prison. Between the 22nd and 24th of January, 1998, Wrubel attacked and fatally stabbed Yevgeny Shelist near Strumy Beach. Only days later, on the 2nd of February, he murdered a passerby named Vladimir Ivanov, whom he decapitated with an axe after asking for a cigarette and a small amount of money for gasoline. On the 9th of February, Wrubel murdered his neighbor Olga Voronkova inside their apartment building at Copley 100B, again while intoxicated. His 6th known victim, Vladimir Kinzersky, was murdered between the 28th of February and the 1st of March inside his own residence. The final killing occurred on the 4th of June 1998, when Wrubel encountered 15-year-old schoolgirl Alice Sivas in Paljasare and cut her throat. Rubel was arrested shortly after the last murder when police traced him through witness reports linking him to the area. During questioning, he confessed to the killings and explained that he had no specific motive, often saying he just wanted to kill. Because he was a minor at the time of the murders, Estonian law prohibited a life or death sentence. The courts sentenced him to 8 years, the maximum term allowed for a juvenile. He was held at Tartu prison, where he served his full sentence. During his imprisonment, Rubel remained mostly silent and showed little remorse. He reportedly avoided contact with other inmates and participated in limited rehabilitation programs. Rubel was released on the 8th of June, 2006 after serving 8 years. Following his release, reports suggested he returned to Ukraine and adopted a new identity, although sightings were later claimed in Estonia. Authorities have stated that there has been no evidence of further crimes committed by him after his release. As of November 2025, Alexander Rubel has served 8 years in Tartu prison, remains at large under a new identity, and has not been charged with any new offenses. He is known to have murdered 6 people in total. Number 20. Raymond Eugene Brown. Raymond Eugene Brown was born in Ashland, Alabama, and was described during his early years as polite and well-mannered. Those who knew him recalled that he came from a stable home and showed no signs of violent tendencies. However, at 14 years old, his life and that of his family changed forever. On the evening of October 1, 1960, Brown entered the home of his Aunt Berta May Martin, his grandmother Ethel Ogle, and his great-grandmother Everlina Ogle. He claimed he only intended to steal money to buy football cleats, but when his aunt caught him in the act, he attacked her with a kitchen knife, attacking her repeatedly. He then moved to the bedrooms of his grandmother and great-grandmother, attacking them to death to eliminate witnesses. The next morning, his mother found the 3 bodies and called the police. Investigators quickly identified him as a suspect after finding bloody heel prints matching his shoes and fingerprints at the scene. When questioned, the 14-year-old confessed to the killings. Brown was tried as an adult in Clay County. After psychiatric evaluation found him sane, he faced a packed courtroom and remained mostly silent throughout. Found guilty, he was given 3 life sentences after the jury recommended mercy. During his incarceration, he became a model prisoner, studying auto mechanics and participating in rehabilitation programs. After 13 years behind bars, he was paroled in 1973 and returned home to Ashland, later moving to Montgomery for work. However, his second chance at life was short-lived. By the late 1970s, he had developed alcoholism and violent tendencies. In 1980, he assaulted his apartment manager and attempted to strangle her. Believing her dead, he fled, but she survived and reported him. Brown was arrested, his parole revoked, and he was imprisoned for 6 years before being released again in 1986. Not long after, he met 31-year-old Linda Lamonti, a single mother of 2, and moved in with her. Their relationship seemed stable until the night of August 9, 1987, when Brown murdered Lamonti and her 10-year-old daughter, Sheila Smoke, in a brutal stabbing attack. He left disturbing notes and staged the scene. Lamonti's 6-year-old son Aaron survived. After the murders, Brown fled but was later arrested at a service station near Jordan Lake after witnesses noticed his disheveled appearance. At trial, he pleaded not guilty, claiming amnesia. A psychiatric evaluation diagnosed him with an organic personality disorder, but he was declared sane. The jury found him guilty of both murders, and on May 13, 1988, he was sentenced to death. Over the following years, Brown filed numerous appeals, arguing procedural errors, juror bias, and ineffective counsel, all of which were denied. He remained on death row at Holman Correctional Facility, showing little emotion and rarely speaking about his crimes. Raymond Eugene Brown died in prison in 2008 after spending more than 3 decades incarcerated across 2 separate imprisonments. As of November 2025, he remains remembered as an example of a paroled killer who reoffended, raising lasting questions about early release policies and rehabilitation failures. Number 21. Graham William Burton. Graham William Burton was born and raised in New Zealand, and was known for his violent temper from an early age. He first came to national attention after the killing of lighting technician Paul Anderson in Wellington in 1992. Burton, then in his mid-20s, confronted Anderson during an argument at a Wellington nightclub. The encounter ended with Burton attacking Anderson to death. He was arrested soon afterward, charged with murder, and sentenced to life imprisonment. During his years in custody, Burton was described as intelligent yet manipulative. He served his time in several high-security New Zealand prisons and often displayed volatile behavior. After serving 14 years, he was granted parole, with authorities believing he had shown signs of rehabilitation. Burton was released into the community in mid-2006. However, within months of his release, he began a violent spree that would once again shock the country. On January 6, 2007, while hiding from police in the Wainuiomata Hills, Burton encountered 26-year-old father of 2, Karl Kuchenbecker, who was riding a quad bike. Burton shot him dead without provocation. During the same period, he injured 4 mountain bikers who crossed his path. The police launched a major manhunt, and after a shootout, Burton was captured. He sustained severe injuries during the confrontation, resulting in the amputation of his right leg above the knee. He was returned to prison and later sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum non-parole period of 26 years for Kuchenbecker's murder. While incarcerated, Burton continued to show violent tendencies. In December 2008, he attempted to murder fellow inmate Dwayne Marsh, a member of the Headhunters gang. Burton attacked Marsh 27 times with a makeshift weapon, one of which punctured Marsh's heart. Marsh survived after emergency surgery. Burton was convicted of attempted murder for this attack, with the presiding judge describing him as a narcissistic sociopath with an ongoing risk of violence. Burton's prison life has remained turbulent. He has spent long periods in directed segregation at Auckland Prison, also known as Paramoremo, where he was confined for 23 hours each day with limited contact with others. In 2016, he was among over 200 inmates subjected to mass strip searches after an assault on prison officers. The searches yielded no contraband, leading to a legal challenge in which Burton was awarded $1,000 in compensation for unlawful treatment. In prison, Burton's behavior has kept him under maximum security classification. Corrections officials maintain that he poses a constant risk to staff and other inmates. A psychological evaluation cited during his sentencing revealed a manipulative and remorseless personality. Burton himself has rarely expressed remorse, often maintaining silence during court appearances. As of November 2025, Graham William Burton remains incarcerated at Auckland's maximum security facility, serving a life sentence with a minimum term of 26 years. He will not be eligible for parole until 2033, by which time he will be in his 60s. Over the course of his life, Burton has murdered 2 people and attempted to murder a third while in custody. Despite numerous psychological assessments and strict management plans, he continues to be considered one of New Zealand's most dangerous inmates. Number 22. David Anthony McGreevy. David Anthony McGreevy was born in Southport, Lancashire, and grew up in a strict military household as one of 6 children. His father served in the British Army, and the family moved often between posting. By his late teens, McGreevy had joined the Royal Navy, but his career ended after he was court-martialed for setting fire to a wardroom. After his dismissal, he returned home to Worcestershire, where he struggled with unemployment, alcohol, and unstable relationships. His parents, weary of his drinking and erratic behavior, forced him to leave their home. In early 1972, McGreevy began lodging with Clive and Dorothy Elsie Ralph in Worcester. The couple had 2 children, Paul and Dawn, and were expecting a third, Samantha. McGreevy paid rent, helped with cooking, and cared for the children while the Ralphs worked. Friends and neighbors described him as playful with the children and apparently affectionate. Over time, he became the family's trusted babysitter. On the evening of Friday, the 13th of April 1973, Clive Ralph drove his wife home from her shift at a local pub. They arrived at their house on Gillam Street to find the front door open, blood on the walls, and their 3 children missing. They immediately went to Worcester Police Station. Within an hour, police discovered their bodies in a neighbor's garden, each impaled on the iron fence. Investigators determined that between 10:15 and 11:15 that night, McGreevy, who had been drinking heavily, lost his temper when baby Samantha would not stop crying. He strangled one of the child, Paul, with wire, and used a knife on Dawn's throat before displaying them on the garden fence. Police found McGreevy walking along Ombersley Road several hours later, trying to hitch a ride out of town. When questioned, he first denied involvement but soon confessed, saying, "It was me, but it wasn't me." He offered no clear motive other than his frustration with the baby's crying. On the 28th of June, 1973, McGreevy appeared at Worcester Crown Court. The hearing lasted only 8 minutes. He pleaded guilty to all 3 murders with no defense of diminished responsibility. The judge sentenced him to 3 concurrent life terms, recommending a minimum of 20 years before parole. In custody, McGreevy was repeatedly attacked by other inmates due to the notoriety of his crimes. For his safety, he spent most of his imprisonment in segregated or protected conditions within various prisons, including HMP Wakefield. Over time, reports described him as compliant and engaged in rehabilitation, particularly through painting and education. In 2006, his temporary release to a bail hostel in Liverpool sparked public outrage after newspapers exposed his presence. The backlash led to his return to a closed facility. In 2009, a High Court anonymity order was granted during his parole proceedings, but it was lifted in 2013 after legal challenges by the press, bringing his identity back into public view. In December 2018, a parole board concluded that McGreevy had shown considerable change after 45 years and deemed him no longer a threat to the public. He was released in 2019 under strict license conditions and lifelong supervision. As of November 2025, David McGreevy, who was 21 years old at the time of the murders, has lived quietly under a new identity in an undisclosed location in the United Kingdom. Number 23. Malcolm B. Benson. On September 23, 2015, in Highland Park, Michigan, 50-year-old Malcolm B. Benson committed a murder that drew national attention because it occurred only months after his release from prison for a previous homicide. At the time, Benson had been out on parole after serving nearly 2 decades for a second-degree murder conviction from 1995. Benson's criminal history began when he was 29 years old. In 1995, he was charged with first-degree murder and felony firearm possession in Wayne County, Michigan. He entered a plea deal with prosecutors, pleading guilty to second-degree murder to avoid a life sentence without parole. The court sentenced him to between 20 and 40 years in prison for murder, and an additional 2 years for the firearm charge. Under the sentencing laws in effect at that time, inmates were eligible for early release if they accumulated disciplinary credits for good behavior. Benson earned these credits consistently and was released on parole on January 13, 2015, after serving just over 19 years at a Michigan Department of Corrections facility. Following his release, Benson returned to civilian life in Wayne County. However, within months, he committed another murder. On the evening of September 23, 2015, at a bus stop near Woodward Avenue in Highland Park, he approached 59-year-old Army veteran Stanley Carter. Witnesses later testified that Benson attempted to rob Carter before shooting him once with a handgun. Carter died at the scene before medical responders arrived. Surveillance footage and eyewitness accounts identified Benson as the suspect, and he was arrested shortly after. During interrogation, Benson provided inconsistent statements, first denying involvement and later claiming self-defense. However, ballistic evidence confirmed that he fired the fatal shot. He was charged with first-degree murder, armed robbery, and felony firearm possession. His trial took place in Wayne County Circuit Court in early 2016. The prosecution presented evidence of his prior conviction, emphasizing that he had been released early under outdated sentencing laws. The defense argued that Benson had struggled to reintegrate after nearly 20 years in prison and that the incident was not premeditated. In April 2016, the jury found him guilty on all counts. During sentencing, the presiding judge stated that Benson's case highlighted the consequences of early release laws before Michigan adopted the Truth in Sentencing policy in 1998. The judge noted that had Benson been sentenced under the current system, he would not have been eligible for parole until at least 2017. Benson showed little emotion during the proceedings and declined to make a final statement. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for the murder of Stanley Carter. The Michigan Department of Corrections confirmed that his earlier disciplinary credits had no bearing on the new sentence. Following the verdict, public officials and victims' advocates renewed calls for stricter parole eligibility reviews for violent offenders. Number 24. Carl Eugene Watts. Carl Eugene Watts, known as the Sunday Morning Slasher, began his series of murders in the mid-1970s across Michigan and Texas. Born in Killeen, Texas, and raised in Inkster, Michigan, Watts grew up in a fractured home marked by instability and detachment. By his teenage years, he had already displayed troubling signs of violence, including stalking and assaulting women. After contracting meningitis as a child, family members claimed his behavior changed, becoming quiet and withdrawn. At 16, he was ordered to undergo a psychiatric evaluation after attacking a woman on his newspaper route. Doctors diagnosed him with antisocial personality disorder and warned he was a threat to society. Watts attended Western Michigan University in the early 1970s, where several women were attacked or murdered. His first confirmed murder occurred in 1974 when he strangled and stabbed Gloria Steele, a 20-year-old student. Over the next 8 years, Watts targeted women between the ages of 14 and 44, often attacking them in their homes or outdoors. His methods varied from stabbing, strangulation, and drowning, and he frequently acted alone, killing without sexual assault. Investigators later connected him to as many as 100 victims across multiple states, though he officially confessed to 13 murders. He was arrested in May 1982 in Houston, Texas, after 2 women, Lori Lister and Melinda Aguilar, survived a brutal attack in their apartment. Aguilar's escape led police directly to Watts. During interrogation, he confessed to 19 attacks and 13 murders. In exchange for his full cooperation, prosecutors offered him a plea deal immunity from murder charges in Texas in return for a guilty plea to burglary with intent to murder. He was sentenced to 60 years in prison. At the time, investigators believed this was the only way to ensure he remained behind bars, as they lacked physical evidence linking him to most killings. While serving his sentence at the Ellis Unit in Texas, Watts maintained a quiet demeanor and showed no remorse. His behavior in prison earned him good conduct credits. and under Texas law at the time, non-violent offenders could earn early release for good behavior. Because the bathtub he used in the Lister attack was not legally defined as a deadly weapon, his crime was reclassified as non-violent. This loophole made him eligible for early parole, potentially allowing his release in 2006 after serving only 24 years. Public outrage followed once the loophole became public. The Texas legislature changed the law to prevent similar cases, but it could not be applied retroactively. Michigan authorities, aware that Watts had killed there, reopened cold cases to prevent his release. In 2004, a witness named Joseph Foy came forward, identifying Watts as the man he saw stabbing 36-year-old Helen Dutcher in Detroit in 1979. Watts was extradited to Michigan and charged with her murder. During the trial, prosecutors presented testimony from Foy and evidence of Watts's earlier confessions. He was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment on December 7, 2004. In 2007, he faced a second Michigan trial for the 1974 murder of Western Michigan University student Gloria Steele. He was again convicted and sentenced to another life term without parole. Throughout both trials, Watts remained emotionless and offered no apology. He never gave a final statement, only denying responsibility for some killings despite prior confessions. Carl Eugene Watts officially admitted to 13 murders but is suspected in over 80. He served approximately 25 years in custody, including his earlier Texas term. On September 21, 2007, he died of prostate cancer at Foote Hospital in Jackson, Michigan, while serving his life sentence at the maximum security Ionia Correctional Facility. As of November 2025, Watts remains listed among the most prolific serial killers in American history, having served 25 years before his death in custody. Number 25. John William Agruw. John William Agruw was born in Illinois and grew up in a working-class family with a reputation for discipline and strict religious observance. In his late teenage years, Agruw began exhibiting violent temper and obsessive behavior. By his early 20s, he had married but struggled to maintain stable employment. On July 21, 1966, at 18 years old, Agruw met his 15-year-old sister-in-law, Suzanne "Susan" Marino, in downtown Joliet, Illinois. He invited her to join him for a walk at Hamel Woods Forest Preserve. When they arrived, Agruw made romantic advances toward her. After Susan rejected him, he became enraged and attacked her repeatedly with a small knife, inflicting about a dozen wounds that caused her death. Later that evening, Agruw returned home and confessed the murder to his wife. When she doubted his claim, he drove her to the wooded site and showed her where he had left Susan's belongings. Following her insistence, he confessed to a local priest, who immediately notified authorities. Agruw was arrested 2 days later and admitted to the killing during interrogation. His confession, along with the physical evidence, led to a swift conviction. The court sentenced him to a prison term of 20 to 50 years, and he was transferred to Joliet Correctional Center. In December 1975, after serving about 9 years, Agruw was granted temporary medical leave to undergo a kidney donation surgery for his sister, Kathleen, at the University of Illinois Hospital in Chicago. Despite being closely monitored, he escaped on May 11, 1976, through a bathroom window, stole a vehicle, and fled the state. Using false identification and stolen cars, he traveled across several states. Within a week, he was captured in Central City, Nebraska, after a stolen vehicle report led to his arrest. He was extradited back to Illinois and completed his sentence without incident. Agruw was paroled in January 1982 after serving 14 years. He relocated to Colorado, first living in Boulder and later in Longmont. That summer, he committed 2 murders in less than a month. Around late June, he encountered 20-year-old Susan Becker near Boulder and stabbed her 13 times in the chest and neck before dumping her body in Boulder Canyon, where fishermen discovered it on July 1st. A week later, he murdered 94-year-old Orma B. Smith, a retired librarian, and his neighbor, whose body was later found in Big Elk Creek Meadows near Longmont. Days later, Agru attempted to abduct a woman at knife point on the University of Colorado Boulder campus but was captured immediately. Although suspected in Smith's murder, investigators lacked evidence to charge him. In March 1983, he was convicted only of attempted kidnapping and returned to Illinois for violating parole. He remained imprisoned until 1989, when he was paroled again. After release, he resettled in Joliet, Illinois, and lived quietly. Neighbors later described him as withdrawn but unsettling, with one woman claiming he had bragged about past murders and exhibited disturbing behavior. Her request for a restraining order was denied because no direct threats were made. On June 29, 2009, Agru was found dead at his Joliet home from an accidental overdose of prescription medication. Relatives discovered women's purses, jewelry, and newspaper clippings related to his past crimes. DNA testing later confirmed his involvement in Orma Smith's 1982 murder. In May 2013, authorities also named him the prime suspect in Susan Becker's killing, citing circumstantial and behavioral evidence. By the time of his death, John Agru had murdered at least 3 women. He spent roughly 20 years incarcerated, primarily at Joliet Correctional Center and other Illinois state facilities. As of November 2025, no additional murders have been officially attributed to him. He died at 61 years old, free and living under his real name in Joliet. Number 26. David Cook. David Cook was a British man whose criminal history spanned several decades and ultimately led to 2 separate murders. His first known killing occurred in Reading, Berkshire, in the late 1980s. At that time, Cook, then in his early 40s, had been corresponding with a Sunday school teacher named Beryl Maynard while he was serving a sentence for robbery. Upon his release, their friendship continued, and she invited him into her home for dinner. Months later, in 1987, he returned to her house uninvited, intending to rob her. During the attack, he strangled Maynard with a dressing gown cord and stole money from her property. He was quickly identified as a suspect, arrested, and charged with murder and robbery. In 1988, after a full trial, David Cook was convicted of the killing of 37-year-old Beryl Maynard. The judge sentenced him to life imprisonment for murder. While incarcerated, Cook reportedly maintained good behavior and participated in various prison programs. After serving 21 years at a British correctional facility, he became eligible for release under license conditions. He was released in late 2009 and moved to Rhymney, in South Wales, where he began a new life under probation supervision. Initially, Cook kept a low profile and was described by some neighbors as quiet. However, over time, he began to accumulate financial debts amounting to nearly £6,000. His next-door neighbor, 64-year-old Leonard Hill, a retired man, befriended him and often helped with small tasks. On June 13, 2011, in the midst of financial strain, Cook invited Hill into his bungalow. There, he attacked him violently, beating him until he was semi-conscious, before binding and gagging him with a pillowcase and strangling him with a television cord. After killing him, Cook took Hill's money and went to a nearby pub where he bought drinks using the stolen cash. Leonard Hill's disappearance soon raised suspicion among locals, and police discovered his body in Cook's home. Cook was arrested and charged with murder. During questioning, he offered limited cooperation but showed no visible remorse. The prosecution at Newport Crown Court described the crime as a brutal and deliberate killing motivated purely by greed. The jury took just 1 hour to reach a unanimous verdict of guilty. In May 2012, Judge John Griffith Williams QC sentenced Cook to life imprisonment with a whole life order, declaring that he would never be released again. In his remarks, the judge noted that Cook had murdered twice for small financial gain, both times preying on victims who trusted him. He described Cook's actions as chillingly deliberate. Hill's relatives expressed outrage that Cook, a convicted killer, had been allowed to live unsupervised next door to a vulnerable man. A formal review was later launched to examine how Cook's parole was managed and whether agencies had adequately assessed his risk before release. David Cook served his second life sentence at HMP Franklin, a high-security prison in County Durham. He was in his mid-70s when he contracted COVID-19 December 2020. Reports from the Prisons and Probation Ombudsman stated that his medical care had delays and that his condition was not initially recognized as severe. He died in custody on December 24, 2020, following complications from the virus. Thank you for watching. Check out these other interesting clips from the channel and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.